Hello everyone, I'm Dragons After Dark, and today we're going to talk about tdScripts. Once people get a good handle on strategy creation, learning how to write tdScripts is generally the next step most want to take. Some have said the written guides are a little difficult for them to follow, so I decided to make a video to show you the parts of a script and hopefully how to start writing your own. First, we'll go over all the parts with an explanation of what they are and why you'd use them, and then I'll create a couple scripts so you can see how it's done, or at least how I do it. So, what is a tdScript? A tdScript is a program that allows the use of battle pet specific code to help semi-automate a pet battle. They won't fully automate the fight because that would be against Blizzard's terms of service, so you still need to hit the A key or a key of your choosing for each move. Now, why do people use tdScripts? They might have a large leveling queue. Perhaps you're leveling a lot of pets all at once against a repeatable fight. tdScripts help cut down on the repetitive monotony of doing the same fight tens or hundreds of times, which can lead to mistakes if you're putting the moves in manually. Accessibility. Maybe the notes from a rematch string are difficult for you to read or understand. The strat may also be written in a foreign language, or maybe you don't have dual monitors and you can't really tab between the game and the strategy on the web page easily. There are many reasons why a person might find tdScripts to be a more user-friendly way to enjoy pet battles. The fight is long, tricky, or both, and you don't want to restart a fight because you lost your place or hit the wrong ability. At the end of the day, tdScripts are here to make things easier for the player and minimize strat failure due to human error. Before you start using or creating scripts, you'll need 3 add-ons: Rematch, TD Battle Pet Script, and TD Battle Pet Script Rematch. There might be other add-ons that allow the use of scripts in their creation, but those are the ones you'll see me and most other people use. In addition to those add-ons, I recommend Derangement and/or Pet Tracker, and Battle Pet Battle Stats. Derangement and Pet Tracker display enemy abilities and cooldowns, and Battle Pet Battle Stats changes the verses at the top of the Pet Battle UI to round numbers. Once you have those add-ons, head into the game and open your pet journal. Find or save a team in Rematch, then right-click the team. You'll get a small menu of options, and among them is Write Script. Click on that and it opens up your script window. Now, scripts are as varied as the people who write them, and there's technically no right or wrong way. If a script works, it works. Once you start writing them and getting more practice, you'll find your preferences and what works best for you. Most people who have been writing them for a while, myself included, try and create them with as few lines as possible. It tends to look neater this way, and with fewer lines, it's usually easier to figure out where a script has gone wrong if that happens. Writing a script breaks down into 2 basic components: actions and conditionals. Your actions are going to be abilities, standbys, and changes. The second component is conditionals, and these are used to determine when the actions will happen given certain conditions of the fight. If and if statements kind of fall into both categories, but we'll go more into those in a bit. The first action we'll take a look at are abilities and their codes. This is where you'll see a line that says ability or use, and then in parentheses, it'll have an ability name, a colon, then a number. Every move in pet battles has its own code number. Now, you can write your line with just an ability name, like wind up, but this can cause problems across languages. It won't be called or spelled wind up in, say, German or Russian. You can also write them with just the code number, which will work across languages, but can make it difficult for people to read the script, especially if you need help figuring out why the script isn't working. Generally, it's best to just use the ability name and code. Once you're in a battle and you have the script window open, you can start typing ability or use, and the editor will bring up all the ability options for your currently active pet. So fear not, you won't need to memorize all the abilities and their codes. Next, you have your standby and changes. Just like with most of the scripting, there are multiple ways to write your changes and standbys. I'll be talking about how I use these, but it can differ between script writers. First, we'll go over changes. Changes are used for bringing pets in and out of a fight. If you're not doing pet swaps in a fight, your script won't need anything more than a change next at the bottom of your script. This will allow you to go to the next pet once your first one is dead. If your first 2 pets are dead, the fight automatically brings your last pet in, so there's no need to script for that. You'll want to put your change next at the bottom, because anywhere else will cause a pet swap when you don't want it. Scripts run off of a priority system, and the higher up a line is, the higher the priority of a move. If you put next above, say, your ability 1, it'll change to your next pet before your current pet can use that ability. Change next at the bottom works because your pet is dead and therefore can't use any of the actions on the other lines of the script, so the priority goes all the way down to the change next. In strategies that have a level pet, you'll usually see something like change number 3 self2.active at the top of a script, while the change next is at the bottom. This tells your script that, after your first pet is dead, it brings in your level pet with the change next line. Since you generally don't want your level pet taking damage, especially if it's a level 1, the change 3 self2 active at the top tells your script you want to bring in your third pet if your second pet, the level pet, is active. As a side note, any conditional that is used for an ability can also be used for a pet change, so if you want to swap your level pet when an enemy or one of your pets have done a specific move, you can do that too. The method I mentioned before, though, will be the most common among scripts. Now on to standbys. Standby is for when you want the script to use the pass function in the battle. This can occur for a variety of reasons. Maybe your pet is stunned, polymorphed, slept, and so on. Or maybe the enemy has an ability that dodges or blocks your attack, and you don't have a useful ability to use for the round of the dodge or the block. Standby can also be strategic. Maybe you need to kill a pet on a certain round to set up another ability, or to eat a specific attack from the enemy. There are plenty of uses for standby in a battle and in turn scripts. When I have some kind of loss of control over my pet, I put standby above the change on the bottom of my script. This makes sure that my standby doesn't interfere with anything else, but stops it short of changing to my next pet because of the priority system I mentioned earlier. If you don't have the standby here or anywhere else, and your pet gets stunned, you'll end up changing to whatever pet you've told the script to change to. The other kind of standby is generally conditional on the enemy, like if they blind you. At that point, you'd want to do something like standby self.aura_blinded.exists, and this standby you'll want near the top of your script. Having this kind of ability at the top makes sure your pet doesn't use any other abilities instead of passing. The last thing to go over for this portion are if and if statements. An if and if is kind of like both components of a script rolled into one. You're basically saying if specified condition occurs, do these things I've listed, and the end if closes the statement. These tend to be very popular with people who are just starting out with scripting, but the truth is, you really only need them when getting very particular on how to fight enemy pets. Most things an if and if does can be accomplished by adding a conditional to an action. I tend to use them when I need one or more pets to do different things against different enemies at different times, and I can't accomplish that easily with just actions and conditionals. Another reason I might use them is if the team has random pets that come in on the backline and I want to do different moves depending on the pet, and it makes more sense to use if-endif over a ton of conditionals. Still, let's take a look at how the if-endif is set up. First, you'll need to determine what conditional you want to set the if-endif up to. Maybe I only want certain abilities used on enemy 1 that won't be used for any other enemies. In this case, I'd start with if enemy number 1.active. This lets the script know that what follows will only be done if enemy number 1 is active. Once I list the actions and conditionals I want done, like we see here with my Amalia script, we close the if with endif. Now, if your if-endif doesn't cover the moves that your active pet has, it will continue past the if-endif to the next usable line of code. So make sure you've got everything between your if and endif if you don't want that to happen. Next, you have your conditionals. Conditionals are anything you add after an ability, standby, if-endif, and change. This makes your pet use any of the actions when a certain condition has been met in battle. There are quite a few conditionals you can use to specify when your pet should use a certain move. Some of them are round, speed, aura, duration, weather, active, HP, HPP, and a few more. You can also use multiple conditionals on the same line, like self.speed.fast and enemy.hpp less than 50. This tells the script that I only want to run an ability if I'm faster than the enemy pet and the enemy pet has a health percentage less than 50%. Conditionals will usually be made based off your pet or the enemy for most conditionals. So let's go over some of them. Round. The round conditional is probably the most popular amongst new scriptwriters. The round conditional indicates you want one of the actions to happen during a particular round. There are a few ways to write round conditionals. Round equals 1. When you have just round and the number, that is for the entire battle. So round equals 15 means you want something to happen on round 15 of the overall fight. Self.round equals 1. Self.round is a conditional about the rounds of your pets. The fight could be on round 10, but if your second pet just came in, it would technically be their first round. Pet rounds reset each time they're brought in and don't carry over from any previous time they may have spent in battle. So if I bring in pet number 1, use an ability on their round 1, swap them out, and then bring them back in, when they come back in, that'll be their first round again. Enemy.round equals 1. Just like for your pets, the enemy pets will have their own rounds too. Next we have rounds using greater than and less than. The greater than and less than symbols indicate you want to use an ability on a round greater than the number indicated or less than the number indicated. Say I wanted to use something like wind up until round 4 and then switch to toxic smoke after that. This conditional can be used to make that happen. I have run into issues before combining the greater than and less than symbols with the equal symbols for certain conditionals, like round equals greater than or equal to 3, so I tend to go one round above or below what I need and just use the greater than and less than symbols. Multiple rounds. When you need to use an ability for multiple and/or a random number of rounds, you change the equal sign to the tilde sign. This lets the script know you'll be using this conditional for multiple rounds. The round conditional sounds great, right? However, the biggest downfall of the round conditional is fight RNG. What happens when an enemy crits your pet in a certain place and throws off your indicated rounds? It can stall or break a script and cause a strat to fail because a move was used when it shouldn't be. We generally recommend that people use the round conditional sparingly unless there's no other conditional that'll work, and or you know that something will happen on that round 100%. The speed conditional is pretty simple. For your pets, you have self.speed.fast and self.speed.slow. The first one indicates you'd want to use an action when your pet is faster than the enemy pet, while the other indicates you want to use an action when your pet is slower than the enemy pet. Enemy pet speed conditionals are written as enemy.speed.fast and enemy.speed.slow, which are basically mirror versions of the self.speed conditionals. HP and HPP. HP in a script stands for health or hit points, while HPP stands for health or hit point percentage. The HP and HPP conditionals can come in handy when you're trying to use a certain move when you or the enemy gets to a certain number or percentage of their health. Examples of this would be using explode when the enemy gets to or below the amount your pet will explode for. Hey everyone, this came up post-recording, but explode has a special conditional. Ability explode enemy.hp.can_explode. Or with predatory strike, where it hits harder once the enemy is below 25% health. You can write this conditional like this. When using HPP, it will be percentage based, so anywhere from 1 to 100, whereas the HP conditional can vary as much as the health of the pet you're using it for. Just as with the round conditional, I've had the equal sign sometimes cause this one to not work, and your best bet is to just stick with the greater than or less than signs. If you wanted this conditional to be, say, self.hpp equal or greater than 50, your best bet is to just write it as self.hpp greater than 49. Weather. Weather is a common pet ability in fights, and even more common is making sure your enemy doesn't get to keep their weather. The weather conditional can make it so that your weather ability is used to cancel out their weather, thus depriving them of a potential advantage. Now, one of the tricks with weather is knowing when to change it. If you're faster than the enemy pet, you don't want to have a script that uses your weather when their weather ability comes off cooldown, like ability arcane storm, enemy.ability sandstorm.usable. That would work if you're slower than the enemy and you know they're using their weather on cooldown. If the enemy has an element of RNG and or you're faster, you'll want something more like ability arcane storm weather sandstorm.duration greater than 3. As far as I've been able to suss out, the weather conditional doesn't have a .active part to it, just duration. I might just not be putting it in correctly, which is a possibility, but I haven't had a problem using the .duration so far. It also allows me to control when I use my weather ability so that I'm not using mine right before their weather ability comes off cooldown. Then you'd be waiting to change the weather over, and that can throw off what you're trying to do or set up for your pets. Abilities. This is where things get a little nitty-gritty as far as scripts go. You use the ability conditional when you're trying to do a particular action depending on an ability's duration or cooldown, whether it's usable, off cooldown, or if the ability is strong or weak against the enemy. For the first two, you do this by typing out enemy.ability. It will then give you a list of the active enemy pet's abilities to choose from, or self.ability for a list of your active pet's abilities. Once you select the ability, add a dot, then you'll be able to choose which conditional you want for the ability. Auras. Auras are anything you see pop up underneath your portrait or an enemy's portrait. These include things like Black Claw, shattered defenses, poisons, shields, and many, many more. Auras, just like other conditionals, can be used for both self and enemy pets. How you write them will depend on what you want to do. If you want to refresh something once it's fallen off your pet or the enemy pet, you'd put ability Black Claw, ! enemy.aura blackclaw.exists, or ability Shell Shield, ! self.aura shellshield.exists. The important part here is the exclamation point. This makes the difference between doing the ability when it doesn't exist as a current aura and doing the ability when the aura is already on you or the enemy. On the other hand, if you want to refresh something before it falls off a pet and for the initial time using the ability, it would look like this. Ability Barkskin, self.aura barkskin.duration less than 2, or ability Wild Magic, enemy.aura wildmagic.duration less than 2. Unless you have the aura codes memorized or saved somewhere, you'll need to wait until you apply the ability to yourself or the enemy before it'll show up in the aura list. What I like to do is put the ability in, use the ability, then add the code once the ability is applied. Auras also apply to things like an Undead Pet's Immortal Round, Mech Pet's Mech Res Round, Flying Pet's 50% buff to speed, and so on. Weak and strong. When trying to script your battle to use certain abilities against certain families, the weak and strong conditionals can come in handy. Strong means the ability does extra damage to the enemy because of their family, like mech abilities versus beast pets, and the same for weak, like aquatic abilities versus magic pets. I don't use this a whole lot, but I did in Nomergon for a couple fights where the backline pets are random, which meant I only wanted to use certain abilities if certain random pets came up. You can also accomplish this by getting the enemy code once you're in a fight, but if the enemies are random, it tends to be easier to just use the self.ability.strong conditional. I haven't made or come across a script in recent memory where I've used the weak conditional, but I imagine it has uses for certain strats and fights somewhere. Active and dead. Active and dead are probably just what you're imagining. Active indicates when a particular pet is active and not on the backline, and dead indicates when something is dead. Active tends to be used for the enemy, but it can also be used for your pet as well. Some of the conditionals mentioned don't always work if you put the specific pet in. They may have fixed it, but I know sometimes trying to put in a specific enemy for Black Claw would just spam Black Claw. But as you can see here, it worked just fine. If you do have this issue come up, you can remedy that by splitting it into two conditionals. Enemy.aura blackclaw.exists and enemy1.active. I haven't found much use for the dead conditional because most of the scripting you'd use it for makes the dead conditional superfluous. Like, you could put change next self1.dead, but really the self1.dead portion isn't needed as long as you have change next at the bottom of your script. Which leads us into combining conditionals. One conditional can help specify when the first component of a script should be used, and 2 or even 3 can make it more specific, like the example from earlier. Ability name self.speed.fast and enemy.hpp less than 50. Most of the conditionals can be combined for very effective and precise scripting, but remember not to get too specific because RNG is a thing that exists. Combining abilities. Now, not all abilities have to be listed for a script to work. Sometimes you can combine abilities by using Ability 1, Ability 2, or Ability 3. One of the most popular pet combinations, the Unborn Valkyr and Icky, can have their script pared down to just 3 lines. Ability number 2, self.round equals 1. Ability number 3, change next. Looks nice and neat, correct? And it is. However, there are some downfalls to using this method if you're using sites that offer alternatives like Zoofoos. When an alternative pet is offered by the site, it's just checking for family type and the abilities, but not necessarily what slot they're in. If someone uses an alternative pet, then tries to use the script, it can break the script, do some really weird moves with the fight, or constantly change pets if the pets can't use what's listed. An example of this is Hunting Party. Even though Hunting Party is slot number 1 for most of the pets who have it, it's slot number 2 for the Shin Chomper. Does this mean you have to have a line for every ability? No, of course not. If the script is really just for you, well, you already know it might not work with another combo you might try out. Or if you're sharing the script with others, you can offer a warning that it might not work with alternative pet. With that, let's go over some notes and advice. Some of your conditionals will also have codes, like when you're using an aura or ability conditional. Also, just because an aura or weather has the same name as an ability does not mean they'll have the same code as the ability. As an example, Mudslide's ability code, the one that makes your pet use the attack, is 572. But if you use the weather conditional, saying you want to use an ability when the weather is up, that code is 718. The same for moves like Shell Shield or Plagued Blood, as we see here. Just like the abilities though, your script editor will give you a list of the auras when you start typing them in, as long as the aura is already applied to your pet or the enemy's pet. Less is more. As I said earlier, the fewer lines the better tends to be your best bet. Overlong scripts can be clunky, difficult to read, and might have more issues that can't immediately be seen because they're so long. More often than not, when I look at scripts from people who are new to writing scripts, they're probably double or more the number of lines they need to be. Unless the fight is terribly complicated, scripts won't need to be more than 10 lines, and even that might be generous. Test, test, and test again. Once you make your script, your next step is to try and break it. Think of yourself as your own QA department. I understand not everyone has a pile of bandages to test their scripts with, but if you're not running a script and strat you plan on sharing at least 10 times, you're probably going to get comments about how something has gone awry, unless it's a very straightforward script. So, if you've got the bandages to spare, try and encounter the absolute worst RNG a fight has to offer and see if your script still holds steady no matter what the fight throws at you. Start small. If you're looking to get a feel for scripts, grab a single pet repeatable fight and go to town. I cut my teeth on the Argus fights as far as strat creation and script writing goes. Unfortunately, I still have a few cringe-worthy scripts floating around over there, but hey, we all have origin stories, right? However, some of the garrison fights that only have 1 or 2 enemies or the Tannin jungle might offer you options that you find more preferable. The idea is that with 1 enemy, you're not likely to need anything crazy specific with your conditionals to make a working script. What a fair few people do is find a fight they use or have used and make a script for someone else's strat. This takes some of the work out as you're not trying to create your own strat, and if they have a script, no peeking, you can compare your script to theirs to see where you or they might streamline or improve it. Or you can use it to ask why they chose a certain line of code over another. Which brings us to the final piece of advice. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I won't claim to be an expert at this. I've just banged my head against my desk enough times that some of this finally sank in. If your script just isn't working, hop on the strat page you're trying to make the script for, or a pet-based Discord like Zufu's, Warcraft Pets, Hazelnutties, or even the Secret Finders, which has a pet channel. Chances are you're going to run into someone on one of those Discords who can help. Or, if your script is working and you're just looking to improve it or see if it can be improved, feel free to ask about that too. People in the pet community, more often than not, will have no problem helping you with your scripts and explaining why they did something a certain way. Now that we've gone through all of that, let's go out and make a couple of scripts so you can get a good feel for how to do it. I've chosen a couple different fights, Karaga and Mindshackle. Let's start with Karaga. The team I've chosen for this fight is the Iron Starlet, my pretend level pet Little Taragosa, and the Nexus Whelpling. Pet battles in BFA saw a significant nerf in the pet experience, so using leveling pets for them isn't generally worth it. But for the sake of creating a leveling script, it works just fine. We've already got our script window open, so let's get started. First, we want to take out lazy, and for that, we'll do windup, supercharge, and windup. We want the supercharge to happen between the windups, and we can do this by loading our first windup, so the aura will come up under our pet's portrait. Once that's done, we can put our supercharge ability above windup. Then, we start writing our conditional by having a left bracket, followed by self.aura. At this point, we'll be given a list of auras to choose from. As you can see, we have a couple here because Lazy has applied Toxic Bite. The one we want is Windup. Once we get that in, we close it with .exists and then close the bracket. Don't forget to save your changes. The nice thing about the script writer is it can help you detect if you miss something, like a bracket, because it won't let you save. Now that we've done that, we can hit run. Now that Lazy is dead, it's Spokes' turn. Most strats using the Starlet will use Windup here, but I've found that I prefer to just use Toxic Smoke until the Starlet dies, which we write by doing this. Ability Toxic Smoke, start our bracket, then put enemy number 2.active. You can specify the enemy there too if you want, but it'll work either way. Pets, both player and NPC, also have codes to help identify them. So, let's run Toxic Smoke until the Starlet dies, and then we have our first change. We make our change by having Change Next at the bottom, which switches over to our pretend leveling pet, the Little Taragosa. However, if this were a real leveling pet, we wouldn't want to keep them in to take direct damage from the enemy, so we put Change number 3 self number 2.active at the top. The reason you don't want to use a specific pet code for this action or conditional is because it won't allow it to work if there are any alternative pets being used, like the Stormborn Whelpling instead of the Nexus Whelp. And of course, you can't predict what leveling pet a person will be using. Once we get that in, we'll hit run, which swaps in our Nexus Whelp. Now that the Nexus Whelp is in, we'll add his abilities. This works because these abilities have cooldowns, and so we don't need conditionals to keep from spamming. Save, then run. And that's my Karaga script. Now, one of the things I do once a script is complete, besides testing at length to make sure it works okay no matter the RNG, is to see if it can be simplified at all. Usually, I'll just have ability number 1 at the bottom, like such. Here, it wouldn't make a big difference because the Nexus whelp probably won't ever need to use its slot 1 ability, but it's nice to have there just in case. Next, I look at the slot 2 and 3 abilities to see if we can combine them. I could probably do something like ability number 2, enemy number 1.dead, but again, we can't always predict what slots Blizzard will put the pet abilities in. This might work for all the pets and alternatives now, but it might not work for future pets with these abilities. Time to test. And it works. I know I said to test a script at least 10 or so times, but if that's not feasible, try to test it at least once more when you have it all together to make sure something weird doesn't come up once you've gone through the whole fight on the initial creation. On to Mindshackle. I chose Mindshackle because it uses one of those strategic standbys we were talking about. My team for this fight is the Mechanical Pandaren Dragonling, Pocket Cannon, and Draenei Micro Defender. We've got our script open, so let's get started. First, we want to open up with Thunderbolt. It has a 5-round cooldown, and based off my next moves, I know I probably don't need a conditional for this ability, so we'll leave it as is. Next, we want to use Breath. Normally, I put ability number 1 instead of a specific ability 1, but because the numbers and rounds are very static in this strat, I know none of the other pets will use their ability 1, so having Breath is just fine. On round 3, Mindshackle always uses Illusionary Barrier X because of its cooldowns, and since I know his Psychic Blast will do 2 hits because Arcane Winds, the weather, I prefer to let Mindshackle destroy his own barrier by passing on round 3. We could do this standby a couple of ways. Since we know Mindshackle will always use this ability on round 3, we can just do standby round equals 3. Or you can do it more complicated and say standby enemy.ability psychic blast.duration equals 1 and enemy ability illusionary barrier x.usable. Of course, you only need conditionals like that for fights where the enemy abilities are RNG based. Here, we know we can use the round conditional because the moves are static. Because Mindshackle is faster than our Mechanical Pandaren Dragonling, and Psychic Blast hits twice while Arcane Winds are up, and Illusionary Barrier eats 2 hits, we can safely use Breath again. At this point in the strat, I want to use Explode for my next 2 moves with the Mechanical Pandaren Dragonling and the Pocket Cannon. The simplest way to do this is to just put Explode round greater than 4. Yes, I said to use the round conditional sparingly, but for static, RNG-free, and number-solid fights, it's okay to use it to simplify something where it otherwise might get a little complicated with other conditionals. We have our change next at the bottom, which will bring in our Pocket Cannon. Because we have Explode right at the top below our standby, and it's a round higher than 4, the script will run Explode again. As you can see, the fight ended on the Pocket Cannon's Explode, but we still have the Micro Defender in slot number 3 to use Ion Cannon just in case. However, we haven't been able to get the Micro Defender in to put Ion Cannon in our script. So I'll either start the fight with the Micro Defender in slot number 1, or, because our other 2 pets are dead, I can just start the fight again and grab the line we need and hit save. We go through our second test to make sure everything combined is running smoothly, and then we're set. Well, that's all for now. If you have any questions, your own helpful suggestions, or if you think I missed something, feel free to post it in the comments below. Like I said, I'm not an expert, and it's possible I did miss or forget something. Also, if you have any scripts you have a question about, as I said above, feel free to ask. If there are any other fights you'd like to see scripts made for, or any strat and fight breakdowns, post the request in the comments. Anywho, I hope you all have a wonderful day or night, depending on where you are in the world, and until next time everyone, happy battling!